Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be talking about XHP's new ignition cut feature. And a lot of you guys have been asking me to make a video on this topic. Honestly, I've been avoiding it because I don't plan on using this on my car for various reasons. It's not that I necessarily think it's a bad feature or there's something wrong with it, but for my specific goals and how I drive and enjoy my car, it doesn't really, work with my overall plans. And I think hopefully I can explain to you guys how it all works and why you might want to turn it on and what it will actually change about your car's driving characteristics. And that way you guys can kind of make an educated decision on if this is something that you actually want to enable or not. So we'll explain how it works, what it does, and how you can actually make a change to how your car drives. And then I'll talk a little bit more about why I don't plan on using it. So hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
Now, in order to understand ignition cut, you have to understand how your transmission shifts. Every single transmission has to have some level of torque reduction at the engine in order for it to complete a shift properly. So with a manual car, of course, it's very, drawn out. You've got to release the pedal, clutch in, shift to the next gear, clutch out, and then get back on the gas in order to keep accelerating and smoothly shift. On an automatic transmission, it's much, much faster, but that operation still has to happen. And there are a lot of different ways that your car can automatically cut down on power and reduce torque to enable that shift. There is actually an article on XHP's Wikipedia page called The Fart Secret. And you can check out that Wikipedia article to see a little bit more information about how it all works. But the one that most of us are focused on is ignition cut. And the reason why ignition cut is great is because it's kind of tailored the best for performance. So when you use ignition cut to reduce torque, you're basically going to disable cylinders for a set period of time to allow the car to shift to the next gear. Usually it's, counted in milliseconds. They estimate like 100 to 500 milliseconds, depending on the shift speed and the driving characteristics of your car. And that will allow you to smoothly shift into the next gear. Now, again, ignition cut is great for performance because it's extremely fast. It's simply a signal that's either being sent or it's not. So by not sending a signal to the engine for a set period of time, you can really quickly disable things and allow torque to drop quickly versus like a mechanical component that needs to move or change in order for you to reduce torque. The other thing is that it can kind of help keep your turbo spooled. So if you're only disabling your ignition system, then your fuel system might still spray fuel, and that mix will get into the exhaust or on your turbo and get hot and ignite. So it can kind of keep your turbo spooled up during shifts as well. So for a performance standpoint, it's really good, but basically all of the different torque reduction options have different pros and cons. A big con with this one is especially at lower speeds, you'll get really jerky shifts. It'll use excessive fuel, your emissions go up, your gas mileage goes down, and it's just kind of wasted when you're using it at low speed and low throttle input. So that's why it's typically only used at higher speed, higher RPM, full throttle acceleration sort of scenarios. Now, the way that the XHP ignition cut feature works is you can actually adjust the threshold where you'll experience those ignition cut shifts. So if you go into XHP and enable the mode, then you'll see you have a couple different drop downs where you can adjust the RPM as well as the torque request. And the torque request is kind of a combination of boost and throttle input and basically everything that goes into that calculation for how much torque the engine is putting out at a given time. So if you lower those, then that basically means you'll experience those ignition cut shifts more often. However, just keep in mind, if you lower it too much, there is a potential that, just driving around town, you'll experience kind of rough shifts and it just won't really be the best for drivability. But it does help contribute to those kind of brap sounds that a lot of people are looking for when they shift. So that means that even driving around town or some, mid-range pulls, you'll be able to hear that sound when your car shifts. Also keep in mind there are 3 different selections of slow, medium, and fast shifts. That is dependent on a lot of different things, primarily your drive mode. So on the off-the-shelf maps, you know, the Comfort mode and Eco Pro shifts are slower. The Sport and Sport Plus and DSC off shifts are faster. So dependent on the mode is kind of where it puts you in that ballpark. So you'll have to adjust different drop downs to change how the car shifts in different driving modes. Now, a lot of people have reached out to me and told me that it doesn't work for them or they aren't able to tell a difference. And I want to remind you guys that this is just lowering the threshold for something that's already happening on your car when you go full throttle. So if you're doing, you know, a draggy pull or drag race or whatever, you're already kind of experiencing these ignition cut shifts at high RPM. All this is doing is lowering the threshold so that it happens more often, but it's not necessarily going to give you faster shifts when you're racing. This is more, I guess, if you're concerned about, you know, how fast your car performs at partial throttle or something like that, then this will give you faster shifts and give you those brap sounds. But in scenarios where you're actually racing and pushing the car hard, it already does this. So you're not really going to experience a difference when racing. It can also conflict with other XHP settings, primarily the torque reduction on upshifts. I highly recommend setting that back to a baseline 0 if you have adjusted it at all in the past, and then mess with the actual ignition cut shifting to find a good spot where you're comfortable with it. And then you can bring the torque reduction on upshifts back in to somewhere where, you know, everything kind of works in harmony. But if you've already got that turned on, it might interfere with trying to get the ignition cut shifting to work when you want it to. So just keep that in mind. Now for me, like I said, you know, I don't really plan on using it, and there are a couple different reasons why. One, of course, is that I have a custom transmission tune, and I did a review on my Sutphin Tune several months ago, and I actually explained to you guys that some of this was already baked into my tune, and I noticed that even in comfort mode, when I went wide open throttle, I was getting those fast shifts. And in Sport and Sport Plus, even if I was just cruising around town, I was getting slow shifts. So it really felt like my shift speed was more dependent on my throttle pedal and how I was driving the car instead of having to pick a specific driving mode, which I really do enjoy. And just in general, you don't really want to adjust custom settings that can affect how your car shifts and drives when you have a custom tune. If I wanted something changed like that, then I would work with my tuner in order to get that baked in. But kind of like the same way that it can interfere with settings for torque reduction on upshifts, it can also interfere with other settings that your custom tuner baked into your map. So if you have a custom tune, I would highly recommend you don't change these settings. And if you want to integrate any of this into your tune, reach out to your tuner and see what they can do. Another thing, of course, is like I said, it doesn't improve performance, but it's going to give you rougher shifts if you lower it too much. And that's not something that I'm a fan of. I like quick, crisp shifts. I don't want the car to feel jerky. I don't want it to feel like I'm in a 1200 horsepower Lambo when I'm driving my 400 horsepower BMW. I'm completely fine with it, you know, having cruising, slow, smooth shifts when I'm driving around town. And then when I actually floor it and hit the paddles, you know, I can get those quick, crisp shifts. So I'm not really a fan of like the roughness that a lot of people seem to be looking for and all the sounds and kind of dramatics that just for me, it doesn't really make the driving experience any better. I would prefer it to be almost like closer to a sequential where it just immediately snaps into the next gear. I think that's kind of like a perfect shift speed or shift experience. But with the ZF8, you know, it still does a great job of blending the best of both worlds for city, cruise, chill driving, and high speed, wide open throttle, you know, racing and pushing the car. Another thing is I have port injection on my car, and I'm not 100% confident I understand how well it integrates with PI, especially with features like MHD. They enabled the PI safety cut, and what that does is it helps turn off the port injectors if the car has any systems that disable the fuel. So if it's trying to cut fuel, but you still spray a little bit of fuel from the port injectors, that can cause a lean condition because, you know, the spark plugs will still ignite as well. And so, you know, I'm definitely trying to make sure I have a better understanding of how my port injection system with my reflex controller will interact with the car during those shifts, especially at low speeds. If boost is just coming on around 3000 RPM and your port injectors are starting to spray, I'm not confident that I understand how that's going to adjust your actual ignition cut for your shifts. And so I'd rather just leave it alone. The way that it all works, I think, is pretty flawless, and I haven't really had any issues yet. So that's something, again, that just adds a little bit more complication to the task. Since the port injectors aren't controlled by the DME or the TCU, it's not something that I want to mess with when it could cause an interference. So yeah, I mean, overall, that's just kind of my thoughts behind it. You know, I like the DME controlling DME functions and the TCU controlling transmission functions. And when everything works in harmony, the way that it was kind of blended from the factory, I think it's pretty much flawless. It's hard to get back to that point, even with custom tunes and stuff like that, because drivability is going to be affected when you upgrade your turbo, upgrade your fuel system, and things like that. It's just going to be hard to get it back as close to as it was from the factory. And so messing with things like this, I'm just not really a fan of trying to keep sliding stuff around and getting lost in all the different settings that I've changed and potentially making the car just a complete mess. So I'm going to leave my car how it is. It works great. The custom tune has been fantastic. But if you guys do feel like messing with it, definitely just understand this is mostly about changing how the car performs in the low to mid range and, you know, medium throttle kind of scenarios. Not something where you're going to experience much faster performance or better times when you're pushing your car, because it already does this from the factory in those scenarios. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.